the sand from July to the end.
Hello, students. Your next lab is on sand. It revolves around a murder on the beach. A victim of foul play was found on Prospector's Cove, a beach known for its distinctive sand. Someone stabbed Mr. Rocky Top, a construction worker, numerous times and then left him for dead. He died approximately 2 hours later, as determined by the autopsy. Samples of sand, dirt, and other crystalline substances were taken from the victim's clothing. Within the next few days, investigators followed various leads and rounded up 7 suspects. All had a motive for harming Mr. Top. The suspects were suspect number 1, Mrs. Tippy Top, the victim's wife.
He's cheating on me with some stupid blonde bimbo.
Suspect number 2, Mr. George Timber, the victim's business partner.
So me and Mrs. Nails could control the construction company.
Suspect number 3, Mrs. Iron Nails, another one of Mr. Top's business partners.
Me and Mr. Timber wanted to take over the construction company.
Suspect 4 was Mrs. I.M. Greedy. She was the business consultant for Mr. Top.
He caught me stealing money and threatened calling the cops.
Suspect 5, Miss Tina Typo, the victim's secretary.
He wouldn't leave his little Puerto Rican wife for me.
Suspect 6, Mrs. Glenda Blender, the victim's cook.
I'm glad he's dead. He kept sexually harassing me.
And lastly, suspect 7, Mrs. Sandy Soil. She was the victim's gardener and landscaper.
I'm glad he's dead. He owed me lots of money for my landscaping services.
During the investigation, detectives found samples of what appeared to be sand among the suspects' belongings. 4 of the suspects said that they had indeed been to a beach, but denied being on Prospect Cove that day. The remaining 3 suspects stated that they were nowhere near a beach on the day of the murder. As a forensic scientist in the lab, you guys are going to analyze the characteristics of the crystalline particles found on each of the suspects and the victim. And you will compare the samples from the victim to the suspect, thereby determining who might the murderer be. So in the lab, you will be analyzing the crystalline evidence from the crime scene and for the characteristics of color under the stereoscopic microscope, texture, luster, and lastly, size. You will record your observations in the data sheet and for each property of the crime scene evidence in the proper row in the data table. When you look at size, that will be your last comparison, and you will be ranging the sample sizes from smallest to largest. So you go from number 1 to number 7, going from smallest to largest crystal sizes in the sample. You will be working in groups of 4, so that each person will be responsible for looking at 2 of the samples, and then you will be comparing your evidence in your data tables. Pre-lab will be due the day of the lab.